you'll have the network diagram, which is what you click onto to get in all the devices, and then you'll have the kind of the what am I doing in this lab sheet. So this gives you all the instructions. Okay, kind of the addressing table, what device has what IP address on what interface, the objectives, background scenario, which is just kind of a bunch of fluff, but hey, it's interesting reading. All right, and then all the steps. All of these things are what you need in order to score points on the lab. All right. I've also, in addition, gone into the PowerPoints, and I've opened up Chapter 2, which is what we're going to talk about next week. But I want to show you what I'm going to do in order to find the different commands to successfully navigate and complete this homework assignment. All right. So also on the activity sheet, it shows you the passwords for the different devices. So the enable password is Cisco ENP-A55. The virtual terminal line password is Cisco VTY-PA55. And I'll go through a little bit of how to navigate in each device to do the commands. So everything is command line. There are routers and switches and firewalls that are out there on the market by all different types of vendors, including Cisco, that have graphical user interfaces, GUIs. All right, but before that ever came about, we had command line. And it's really good because a lot of organizations, even though the devices come with a nice GUI, they disable. Okay, because a lot of times GUIs run either on a client or they're HTTPS based. They can be fuzzed. They can have vulnerabilities that come out. You can sniff the back-end code. You can't do that in a terminal session. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of progress through all these steps. I'll try to go slowly. If I'm going too fast, please raise your paw, throw something at me. I don't care. It's all good. I'll slow down. All right, so the first step here in testing connectivity, this is not graded, but this is a nice, this is what we need to do in order to ensure that the network is working. So to go in and ping from PCC to R3, you have to look at the addressing table. So to ping R3, I can ping either one of these IP addresses, 192.168.3.1 or 10.2.2.1. PCC is already on the 192.168.3 network, so it would be logical to ping the 192.168 network. Go to the diagram, I find PCC, I click on it, and another window pops up. Okay? From here, you go to the desktop tab. You can simply open a command prompt. Looks like Windows, right? And type that ping command. Everybody's used the ping command, yes? Ping 192.168.something.something. 3.1. Okay, and I get replies. Great. Perfect. So I know that that connectivity between this PC and this router interface is working. That's all that we're really doing in testing and doing all these connectivity tests. Okay, but they are not graded. Okay, ping R2 to R3. Now on R2 is a little bit different. You actually have to go into the router. So R2 to R3, we're going to ping the 10.2.2 network. When we click on it, we get a similar window that pops up, but we want to go to the CLI interface. Okay, enter a couple of times. This prompt here is just regular standard user mode. How do I know it's regular standard user mode? I know it by the prompt because it's a greater than sign. Okay? Now, I may or may not be able to ping R2, or R3, excuse me. But I go back, I look at R3, 10.2.2.1. 10.2.2.1. And if I get 5 exclamation points, 5 bangs, that's good. It means I got a proper response. If I got periods or question marks, that's bad. Okay, moving on. Telnet from PCC to R3. So with Telnet on PCC, I've got to get out of this terminal. I'm sorry, command prompt, and I need to go to a terminal session. So I open up a terminal session. This is just my setup. Keep all these the same, click OK. Alright? Excuse me. I'm thinking something else. I'm thinking of the console line. My fault. Terminal. Throw me off. Telnet 2.168.1. Alright. So I actually need the command prompt. When I telnet, it'll ask me for the password. And that password is that VTY password. Cisco VTY PA55. Type that in. The characters will not show up, but you should be returned the command prompt from R3. Okay? And then finally, telnet from R2 to R3. Alright? So going back to R2, same concept. Telnet to 10.2.2.1. We'll ask the password. Cisco VTYPA55. And I get the R3 prompt. So those are just a few basic connectivity steps to ensure that, hey, the network is functioning the way it's supposed to be. You'll see that a lot in these packet tracer activities. Okay. So from there, if I exit to get back out, I shut the command prompt down, minimize everything, and move on. So next, it's going to ask me, hey, configure R1, R2, R3 as NTP clients. Verify client configuration using the show NTP status command. Here's where you need to go to next week's lecture, okay? And if you just do a simple Control F and you look for NTP, you will eventually get down to where the commands are to set up the NTP client, like it's asking. Okay, NTP clients, either contact the master or listen for messages from the master to synchronize their clocks. This is how we basically synchronize the clocks between devices. Use the NTP server, and then at the IP address that you're syncing to, command. So I need to find out what this IP address is, and then on each of the routers, run this NTP server command. Okay, so if I go back to diagram, I see that my NTP server is at 192.168.1.5. Alright, I've already done this on R1, so we do it on R2. But to enter any command into a router, a switch, a firewall, I have to be in a different mode. I can't do it from the general user prompt. That's a security feature. I have to go into, or I have to be in a configuration mode. All right, whether that's an interface configuration mode, global configuration mode, line configuration mode, etc. Before I can get to that configuration mode, I've got to be in what is known as privileged exec or privileged executive mode. All right, And to do that, I have to enable that mode by typing enable, or EN for short. It's going to ask me for a password, and that's that Cisco enable password on the sheet. Cisco ENPA55. My prompt changes to a £. Okay, that tells me I am now in privileged exec mode. I want to get out of privileged exec mode back to user mode. I type in disable. And if I want to go back into privileged exec mode, I can type enable. If I want to be really lazy, I don't have to type it in. If I've already typed it in, I can hit the up arrow until I find the previous command. You cannot do that with a password though. You have to type in the password every time. Okay. Now I need to get into global configuration mode in order to enact that NTP command. All right. To do that, I have to tell the router that I want to configure it. All right. And when I type in configure, it's going to ask me, well, what do you want to configure from? Memory, network, or terminal? Terminal is the default. It's in the brackets. So I can just type T. I can hit enter. When I hit enter, my prompt changes again. Now I have config in parentheses in front of my £. Now I'm in global configuration mode. If I want to get out of global configuration mode, there are several ways I can do. I can type exit, or I can use a hotkey called Control+Z. And that gets me out. If I don't want to go through the whole prompt, I can just type in CONF space T. It does the same thing as what I did before. Same effect. Now I can type in that NTP command. NTP server. If I'm ever curious, I don't know what I'm typing, I can use the question mark as a help key. NTP space question mark. And it tells me, okay, here's all your choices. Oh, server. Okay. If I want to start typing and I'm not sure how to spell server, you have tab complete just like in Linux. So I can start typing it. If it's, once the command is unique, I can hit tab. It will complete the command for me, or that portion of the command. All right, now I have to tell it what the IP address of the NTP server is, which is 192.168.1.5. And then it asks you to confirm with the show NTP status command. When I do that, it tells me that the clock is synchronized, the stratum it's using, what the NTP server is, its frequency, etc. So I know that it's working. Okay? I've already done this on R1. Let me go through it again on R3. Again, just click on the router, click on CLI tab. Go into enable mode first, ENABLE, or just EN will work as well. The password for enable, Cisco ENPA55, it's in the documentation. Global configuration mode, CompT. And then the NTP server, and the IP address 192.168.1.5. Okay? Now, if you don't want to exit out of global configuration mode, you want to do a show command to say, hey, I want to see if that worked or not. In later versions, most all modern versions of Cisco IOS, you can preempt the command with do, and it will run the command as if it were just in privileged exec mode. Right? So if I try to do that show NTP status, It's going to say, oh, invalid input. Because I'm not in the mode that I need to be in to run that command. If I put do in front of it, show NTP status, it will run it just like I was in privileged exec mode. Okay? So that's all working. Your final check for the homework, let's go back to your activity, and down here in the lower left, you can check results. On that page, if you go to the middle tab, which is assignment items, you can see, oh, hey, I have 3 out of 27 points. So on R1, I've gotten the NTP address, gotten it on R2 and R3. So this is how you progress through the homework every week. All right? 95+% of all the commands that you're going to need are going to be in the lecture from that week, or in this case, from next week. All right? What you're not going to have in there is the basic primer, how do I navigate through the iOS, i.e., how do I get in enable mode, how do I get in global config mode, how do I get in interface config mode, how do I get in line configuration mode. All right, that will, after you do this for a couple of weeks, it'll be second nature to you. Okay, take some good notes. All right, so you can kind of fall back on it, but after you do it a few thousand times, trust me, it'll stick in the gray matter.
Excuse me. What's the one that says update calendar? Why is it incorrect?
Next, so on R1, R2, and R3, periodically update the hardware clock with the time learned from NTP. All right, verify that the hardware clock was updated using show clock. So to update the hardware clock, you can go back to the lecture. It's around the same area, I think. Okay. Always. So, to periodically update the hardware clock with the time learned from NTP master, let's go on to R2. NTP, update calendar, configure NTP to update the calendar. All right, that will periodically update the clock. Same thing on R3, NTP, come on, NTP, update calendar, I need to open up R1. EN for enable, just go ENP855 as the password, config T to get into global configuration mode, NTP update calendar is the command. Now, if I go back, check my results, I now have all the update calendar done. Okay? So each one of these areas is going to be associated with some form of command, basically, you're inputting into the router or switch. Okay? Everybody following me so far? Any questions so far? All right, what's next? Okay, you don't have to do the verify clock, but you can. Configure routers to timestamp log messages. Configure timestamp service for logging on the routers. So the timestamp service Again, timestamp. In this example, the command identifies the amount of failures, usernames, tried, obtained, etc. So that is showing the timestamp. Alright, so we didn't find it. Okay, no problem. Let me show you how to trick that. Question mark. Okay. It's a little bit tricky. You actually have to go through the logging process. So it's a service for logging on the router. So the service for logging is called logging. Alright? And we would, I'm sorry, the service would be service timestamps. That's what it is. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. So to start a service on a router, the command is service. And the key there with that message is configure timestamp service. So it's looking for a service to be started. So service timestamps, that's for debug and log messages. And then it has to do it for logs. You remember correctly? For logging. So we're going to put in log. And then how do we want to log it? By a date time. Include milliseconds. Kind of a long command, but you keep going until you see that CR. CR standing for carriage return. Carriage return. Hit enter. Let's go to R2. Service. Timestamps. What comes next? Question mark to help you out. Log. Date time in milliseconds. Repetition is the way to learn, guys. So have R3 left. Service. Timestamp. Log, date, time, MSEC. Service, timestamps, log, date, time, in milliseconds. Alright, now, back and check the results. Hey, I'm up to 9 points. Service, timestamp, log. Service, timestamp, log. Service, timestamp, log. You guys get the picture on all this? Next. So, hey, we're all done with part 1. Part 2. Configure the routers to identify the remote host, syslog server, that will receive logging messages. The router console will display a message that logging has started. So, with this, we've got to identify that what the IP address of the syslog server is to the router. Going back to the diagram. Hey, there's our syslog server, 192.168.1.6. Okay? Logging. Alright. Syslog logging. Service provides 3 primary functions. Great. Great. So here's how you configure it. Set the destination logging host using the logging host command. There's other trap commands that you can use. I think that all we need to do is logging host IP address. They give you a code snippet here somewhere. Oh, maybe they don't. Alright, I'll step you through it. So on R1, logging, host, and then the IP address, 92.168.1.6. Okay. Same thing on R3 and R2. Alright, again, check your results. Hey, I'm up to 12. SysLog client, server address, it's all set up. Okay, so now we need to set up, it looks like SSH and RBTY lines, username, IP domain name on R3, and we're pretty much done. So, you can verify logging with the show logging command on all your routers. You can examine logs on the syslog server. There's a way that you can do that in Packet Tracer. If you go to the syslog server itself, you click on it. You can look at services, syslog, and once logs are created, they're sent to here. So we'll see that in a second. All right. So we now need to configure R3 to support SSH. Okay. So with this, we're going to configure a domain name of ccnasecurity.com. We're going to create a user called SSH-admin with a password of Cisco SSHPA55 with the highest possible privilege level, which in this case is going to be 15. We're going to then configure our virtual terminal lines to accept SSH connections. Okay? So, here's how we do that. We're going to configure a domain name. And in configuring SSH, you have to have three things in place first. You have to have a domain name configured on the device. You have to have a host name configured for the device, which is already done. Our host name is R1, R2, R3. All right. You have to have a user associated with the device if we're using local authentication, which is the case here. All right. And then you have to create an RSA modulus, all right, which is basically your crypto key for use in encrypting your traffic between the client and the host. All right, so we're working on R3. So first things first, domain name. It is done under the IP configuration. So IP domain-name. And then the name, which in this case they want to be ccnasecurity.com. Please spell it right. I have had students in the past, they're like, hey, Professor Brown, I cannot figure out this one point that I'm not getting for this or that, and they, fat-fingered it, they mistyped it. So word to the wise, make sure that you type everything verbatim for the instructions. I've even made that mistake before in real life. All right? So that's done. Then I need to create a user called SSH-admin It is case sensitive. Your usernames are case sensitive, just like your passwords are case sensitive. This works just like Linux. Okay? So the command to create a user is user, short for username. The user's name, SSH admin. The password, which is Cisco SSH PA55. And then the, did I do it? I did it out of sequence. Hold on. Privilege, privilege level 15. Password, Cisco SSH PA55. It should really not matter whether privilege comes first or password comes first. That really should not matter in an actual router. It doesn't. Okay? Hit enter. So I made my user. Now I need to configure the incoming VTY lines on R3. So now I've got to go into line configuration mode. Alright? So if I look at if I exit out of all configuration modes. Alright? Hey look, I just got a logging message that I changed stuff. We'll go to the syslog server in a second, we'll see that. Alright? If I want to look at my running configuration, I'm going to use the command show run. Alright? This is everything that's configured. So you see where I have my enable password, you see where I made my user. I'm just hitting enter to go line by line. You see my IP domain name that I made there. You see the logging that I did. Alright, now, there's my VTY lines. I have lines 0 through 4, so I have 5 VTY lines. I could go through each one of these one by one by one, but the beauty of configuring the VTY lines is you can configure them all at once. Okay? You have to go into line configuration mode and tell it what line am I configuring. So I go back into global configuration mode first, and then I type line space VTY space 0. And if I hit enter here, I would only be configuring line 0. But if I hit a space and then a 4, I will configure lines 0 through 4, all 5 of them, at one time. My prompt changes to line configuration mode. Okay? So, alright, where was I at? Use local user, create SSH admin. Oh. Use the local user account for mandatory login and validation, except only SSH connections. Okay, so I have to use the login command for the VTY lines. Again, I believe you're in the lecture. On slide 21, it goes through the process here of configuring SSH. It's actually really good. It gives you all the commands, everything that I'm doing here. It even gives you a code snippet of how you do it. All right. So here I want to use login space authentication. Oh, excuse me, login local. We are not using AAA. So login space local. That tells me I use the local user database. There's only one user in it. Login local. And then I want to restrict to only using SSH. So I use that with the transport command. Transport input SSH. Okay? Because with the virtual terminal line, I could use the SSH protocol or the telnet protocol. Telnet, we don't want to use telnet. If you can ever avoid using telnet, you always avoid using telnet. All right. So I did that for all those lines. All right. Let's go back and check our work so far. Wow, almost home, 23 to 27. Ooh, it didn't like my username though. Didn't like my username. All right, let's go back and look at that. Could be a couple of different things. Take a look at our username here. Username SSH admin, privilege 15, password. Okay, that looks right. Create a user ID of SSH admin with the highest possible privilege level and secret password.
Yeah.
There are two types of passwords on a router switch. General. Your standard password and your secret password. Okay? Your secret password is hashed differently on the system than just a regular password. A regular password uses an unsalted hexadecimal hash, basically 0 through F, right, as a scramble for encrypting it. A secret password is hashed with MD5, Message Digest 5th generation, right? It's much, much, much stronger. Okay, so this is where I goofed, kind of by design. All right. So, because I want to show you how to take out a command. You goof up something, you're like, oh man, I got to start all over. I'm 90%. No, don't sweat it. Okay, don't sweat it. Get to know no. No removes anything from the configuration. Okay, so if I look at my running config, there's my username. And to get out of this, if like I'm halfway through here, all I have to do to quit any type of show command is Q. I hit Q, I'm back to my prompt. Very helpful when you're trying to do stuff midway through a configuration. So I want to remove that username because I need it. I don't want to use that password. Also, that password's unencrypted. Bad idea. Type no, space, and that command in its entirety. Username, SSH admin, privilege, tab complete. If I do a show run again, hopefully took it out. Yep, it's not there. Not there anywhere. All right. So now, shortcut, up arrow, back arrow, take that out. Forward arrow, go to where it says password, delete that. Type in secret. That's the actual command it's looking for. I hope. Alright? So that's done. Check results. Hey, like that a lot better. My username's all checked now. So the only thing I have left is I gotta do my SSH authentication, my SSH timeout, my SSH version. Okay? And I'm pretty much done. So with that, Okay, I need to generate the crypto key, set the version, the timeouts, and the attempts. Now then it's just kind of checking. Alright? So I want to ensure that I do the modulus, generate RSA encryption. So it's going to use an RSA key for authentication and encryption. It wants me to set the modulus at basically 1 kilobit. The default's 512. Alright, no problem. Here's how we do that. R3. Alright, I'm going to exit out of global configuration mode because this has to be done in privileged exec mode. Okay? I'm sorry. It is done in global configuration mode. My platform is mixed up. So crypto key generate RSA. What do you want your modulus to be? I want it to be 1024. Alright, it'll take a second. We'll do a show run. And now I should have an SSH key. No, it's not going to show it. It's one of the things I hate about Packet Tracer. Typically, in your configuration, you'll have an entire, what looks like a certificate, it's actually an SSH key, in your running config. Okay? That's neither here nor there. We still need to fix up the SSH version, the authentication mechanism. Oh, here we go. Timeouts and authentication parameter. All right. So the default SSH timeout and authentication can be altered to a more restrictive set. Set the timeout to 90 seconds and the number of authentication retries to 2, and the version to 2. So how you do that is with the SSH IP SSH authentication retries, they want that set to 2. IP SSH timeout, they want it set to 90 seconds. And IP SSH version is going to be version 2. Okay? So IP SSH authentication retries 2, IP SSH timeout 90, IP SSH version 2. All right, on a normal router, you would come out to privileged exec mode and write that to memory, so it goes to the startup config. All right. Now, check results. Looky there, 27 to 27. Sweet, 20 points. So now, very important, you need to save this.